How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to the North Carolina Cryptid and Paranormal Project. My name is Tom, and I'm the host of this channel. Glad to have everybody out here tonight. We have a good episode with a good guest. His name is Mike from Abnormal Investigations, and he's got some good stuff to talk about tonight. So we're kind of going to change things up and instead of having like witnesses or people who had encounters on. He actually runs a channel about discussing like cover-ups and animal attacks and whatnot. And he actually goes far deep into investigating as to like contacting local authorities where these things happen and getting information that some people don't have the ability to get. So without further ado, here is Mr. Mike.
Hey, it's good to be on your show. I'm flattered to be here with you.
I'm glad to have you on tonight. I've been like, I think after maybe your second or third, not I don't know if you're like your second or third that I've watched of your uploads. I was like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's good, and he just has a knack for this, for doing what he's doing. So I was like, I got to get him on soon. And then once I had the ability, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna, be able to have you on and talk to you and pick your brain or just hear what you have to say about a lot of the stuff that you've actually done. You know, between boots on the ground / your own physical research into some of these disappearances / animal attacks, whatever you want to call people want to call them, mysterious deaths, all that. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I grew up at my granny's, and at her house, it was a constant Bigfoot, Dogman. I think there was even probably some paranormal there, but I grew up with it. So to me, it was really nothing new. We had our rules at night that were just common. We knew to be in before dark. Granny would hang up, the blankets over the windows. The doors had to be locked. We knew to turn the lights off. You creeped around the house at night. You were quiet, moving in the house because it would follow you from window to window.
Hmm.
And just grew up like that. Even when my granny had her stroke, it would mimic her ringing the bell for help at her window. And we later found out it was doing that to watch the girls walk past the window to go help her. So that they're intelligent. I've heard them personally. I've heard them speak, but I've never heard them use a sentence. Only single words. I've never heard a full sentence. Always just it's one word that they will use. But just growing up and being in it and everything, I was interested in it and everything. And then I had a buddy that's a detective that I'd worked with, and another buddy who works at the police department. And they said, since you're not working at the police department anymore, you should air it what you're trying to do and everything. And so I done one video. It done pretty good, so I continued to do it. I just look at it as if I was at work. I worked security and law enforcement all of my life. I was over the largest vault in Oklahoma. It had Coast Guard clearance. I worked 8 years as an investigator. I was a captain whenever I got hurt. That was my last rank. I was the youngest captain that they'd actually had at the facility. I was over 162 men. Done a lot of things can't talk about. Some things I can. There was a lot of military holdovers. But yeah, we stayed busy. So I just apply the same techniques to these stories as I did when I was working or preparing for a case. Start with things you know to be true. And then, of course, we have to speculate in this field. And we do the best we can to try to build on a rock. That way we have a solid foundation to try to find the truth. And that's pretty much how I do it.
That's definitely a good way to put it, because some of these things can be ruled out, and a lot of them can be like they're so questionable. It's like you can just tell they're cover-ups, the way they're worded, the way articles are printed out, the way that the newspaper they'll talk about it for like 2 days and then they won't talk about it no more, and that's just a dead red flag for like cover-up. So yeah, Mr. Duffy. Okay. Well, where do you want to start?
Just any of them that you want to talk about, I'm open to any of them. I think that they're all. I mean, it's sad the length that they go to cover things up. I think that the kids especially when the kids are involved and the kids are murdered, and I look at the reports. A big part of my job when I worked was approving reports. So I know that whenever I look at a report, that an officer writes, you can tell if it's been changed, altered, uh, and that's happening a lot. For instance, I spoke with law enforcement on a case where a kid was killed, and they told me the child was found in the backyard. I then spoke directly to the father, and the father says, "No, my child wasn't in the backyard. He was found out in the field by the pond, and they wouldn't allow us into the backyard until they moved the body to the backyard."
Wow.
Yeah, and then I had IMSA, first responders, and other police officers, and also neighbors that they all backed the same story.
Yeah, that's one weird thing about the commonality about a lot of missing people are found. A lot of them are found dead. Whether it's 1 to 3 days later, they're always found dead, and there's something always has to do with a body of water, which makes it really strange and puts out that high strangeness factor. Like, what does water have to do with these people being found? Whether they're like I've talked to you earlier, but when in the pre-interview, like the guy they found in Charlotte, which was not in October, yeah, 78-year-old guy found at a creek. The creek was a foot deep, and he was missing for 3 days. But they found him, on the third day in a creek which was only a foot deep of water. So how do you die in a foot of water? That's the weird thing.
It almost makes you think of the old Indian ways of how they used to take the meat, put it in the creeks to try to preserve it to keep it cold.
Oh
You know,
wow, that's a good point. Here's a
maybe
question from Steve. Do you know about this at all? Not County, Kentucky.
not county. Not that I maybe I have trouble with the counties and all the cases I
That's
look at.
right. Steve, if you know the name,
Yeah,
the name might be easier for Mike to come up with because sometimes the counties, I mean it's crazy. You had what was it last year in Cock County, Tennessee? Two people went missing, or two people were found dead. It was the big thing was Jimtown Road. The girl was a teacher, wasn't she a teacher? I
yeah, I
think.
think so. Yeah, and
And
then
she was found. She was found. She was found in a body of water. You don't say. And she was all torn up. She was dismangled. All of her skin, her flesh was ripped apart. And surprisingly, she wasn't dead. But when they got her to the hospital, she didn't make it. After I think the first day, she just didn't survive.
yeah, she was. They actually reported in the autopsy that she was consumed alive.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Consumed.
yeah, and then they said that she was uncooperative.
I mean, obviously, if you're consumed, you're pretty much alive. Yeah. Okay. Steve said he was dragged up 100 feet up on a hill. I think I remember that story. The young boy, he was dragged up on a hill. I think they found him on a cliff, and I think they
Corey,
blamed it on like a mountain lion or a cougar or something.
maybe Corey Godsey. Is that the?
Yeah,
I
Corey
think
Godley. Yeah.
I think he was the one that was drug up from behind the house up a steep hill. They said that no animal would have been able to do that. Yeah, I spoke to a guy from that county that was a deputy sheriff that was there on the search and rescue, and
Yep. Quits it. Corey Godley.
yeah, yeah, and they first said that whenever they found the body, that the body was not in that bad a shape, and
Mm-hmm.
I had trouble with that. I didn't believe it at first, so I ended up making some phone calls, and I found a deputy that was willing to speak with me. And after speaking with the deputy, uh, this little boy was in really bad shape, uh, pretty much shredded, pieces missing, same as the other cases. He said, the terrain that they had to traverse to get up to the body, he said it was almost straight up and down. Uh, he was almost stuffed underneath some briars, like somebody was maybe saving him to eat later, or like an animal would stash. And his throat was missing. A lot of his throat was missing, and I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed in a lot of these cases, the throat is missing. A lot of people say, well, the throat was cut and everything, but in a lot of these cases, if you look at the autopsy, the throat is actually missing. And there was a little girl in Oklahoma that was attacked, and this creature reached over the fence and it bit her over her shoulder and over her chest, plumb down. And she was 12 years old. And when they got her to the hospital, when the police came, they interviewed her with the game warden. Well, after they'd interviewed her, they came out and said, "Well, she said, what bit her? It was a coyote." Well, her mom later on talked to her daughter, and her daughter said, "Mama, it wasn't a coyote, but they told me that that's what it had to be." And her
Mm-hmm.
mom actually went around town trying to warn people, and she was threatened with arrest for causing terroristic threats, causing panic in the streets and everything. But she said her daughter said what attacked her ran away on two legs with a big bushy tail, but they were threatened with arrest.
Yeah, a lot of people get threatened, silenced, told to not say nothing or, don't talk about it anymore or whatever the case is, harassed, whatever you want to call it, whatever it may be. And it was just like Flat Rock says, he said it earlier, welcome Flat Rock. Let's see. Until wildlife officers, game wardens, and other authorities are able to write up the reports of these creatures, encounters, and attacks, nothing will change. He's absolutely right. They're pretty much made to write it off as a, bear, uh, you know, dog, wild dog, wolf, coyote, whatever they can put the blame on.
Even whenever I worked, part of our protocol was if we got a call out, and we got a lot of call outs, of a Bigfoot at somebody's house, or they would call it in, and we weren't allowed to put that in a report. It was a prowler, you know, it had to be a
Mm-hmm.
prowler. They
Yeah, prowler.
yeah, had to be a prowler.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the main thing is like, or like a lot of my good friend Al Sanderiga, the Squatch Father, he uh he talked about stuff that happened in Florida in the '70s, and he actually and I witnessed a lot of stuff that happened back in the '70s with a skunk ape that was terrorizing a neighborhood where he was staying at his cousin's house, and a lot of the neighbors were reporting peeping toms. They were saying they were calling the local deputy saying there was peeping toms peeping in their windows. Problem is their windows are 8 foot tall. You got
Right.
to be 8 foot tall or bigger to see through these windows where they're saying you got a peeping tom, and they didn't know better. That's what they called it, and this thing terrorized the neighborhood. It wound up. I mean, it's long story short. This thing wound up taking a Brahma bull and ripping his head off of a prize Brahma bull of a rancher, and then jumping over a fence, smashing down like a Hulk smash on the front hood of a deputy's patrol car. And back then, back in the '70s, those patrol cars were like tanks; they were heavy,
Right.
and it made the whole back end pop up. And he was watching through the sunroof in his cousin's vehicle. So it's crazy, and I guarantee you that report was probably redacted, 100%.
Oh yeah, there is steps just like we had. An officer writes a report. It's got to go through through the sergeant, the lieutenant, and then finally through me to be approved. We have what they call safeguards, and it's to make sure nothing makes it to the courts that you don't want to make it to the courts. It's not right. It's not fair, but unfortunately, that's how it works. You know, Even at my grandma's and at my granny's, when it would happen, they would climb up into the trees and would watch her, from the trees through her windows. And they would jiggle the doorknobs and push on the windows, scratch on the house. And it was every night it would happen. I remember when I was little, even going to the bathroom, we'd go to the bathroom and the thing would, turn the doorknob and push on the back door, and it'd scare us to death. It was like it just knew where you was at. And it just every night. And when it would breathe, we always compared its breathing to a coffee pot, percolating. It always had that rough kind of a growlish breathe. But it called my mom's name one night. That was the first time I'd ever heard it speak. And
Wow,
yeah, it said my mom's name. It was crazy.
it must have heard somebody call her name before, and I guess it was mimicking. I mean, I've heard that before.
Well, my granny before, even before this happened back in the 50s, it walked up on her sidewalk and reached its hand out, in the come here motion, and it was saying her name, telling her to come here,
Oh
trying to
wow,
get her to come outside.
that's
So
intense. I mean, that would have given me a heart attack if something outside like that calling my name. I
yeah, and
mean,
if she lived in the middle of nowhere, I mean, where we lived, there's nobody around. Our county is so small. At midnight, we don't even have a deputy on duty. So if you
that,
call for help, the deputy's at home. He's got to get up, get dressed, get in his car, and drive to wherever you're at. And we're in a large county,
right?
but it's very secluded. And at midnight, there's not a deputy on duty.
Yeah, it's pitch black. There's it's quiet. It's out in the country. Now, what state do you live in?
Oklahoma.
Okay, so you're in Oklahoma. Are you anywhere near like the Red River,
I am actually in
um,
the northeast, up by
northeast?
Ulagal Lake, that area.
Okay. Because I have a
And there's
friend that lives out there. I actually have a couple friends that live in Oklahoma. Jack Carey does some research out there, and then an old friend D from the BDRP. He was doing some stuff out in Brown Springs out there. So yeah, there's two areas that are pretty popular. I can't think of the forest that Jack does his research, but I think he has access to like acres and acres of woods that his friend owns, and there's actually ongoing activity there, and he's getting ready to produce some good evidence. His actually his people look down on it, but his way to get DNA instead of actually going out to take one down, he was actually going to check a burial mound area that he thought might have been a Sasquatch burial, and he was just going to try to extract something to prove to produce DNA, which I think is a great way to do it,
right.
which would be saving some of these other groups that want to go bag one. That's, I mean, nobody wants to do that. I wouldn't do that. If you had the opportunity to get DNA from something that was buried from God knows how long, I mean, you can get DNA from it. That's great. I mean, you might be stirring something up of burial grounds, but if you can produce that, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever I go out in the field and I investigate them or whatever, I do it like my job. As long as I'm not in danger, my team's not in danger, then we're there to observe and to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
that's mostly what we try to do. And it always seems like when we go fishing, mostly we take the kids with us, and it
Okay.
always seems like it's more interested in the kids. It will
Yeah.
throw little pebbles at them, little sticks at them the whole time we're there. It'll make baby cries. It'll,
Mhm.
little kitten, any kind of little noise it can make to try to get the kids interested in it. Of course, I keep the kids right in front of me whenever we're fishing, especially at night, because where we're at, it is in the middle of nowhere. But it's like it tries to entice the kids. It's almost eerie. It's like if it could get them to come out there, that's kind of like I feel like what it's trying to do.
Yeah. We're not buffering, are we?
I look good here.
Sure. Yeah, I'll pull that back up. But yeah, he was NAWAC, North American Wood Ape. They put a lot into their Area X. Yeah, I've noticed that too with children too. It's like my kids. I actually live in an active area. I mean, I don't think it's active all year long. I think it has certain points of the year where it gets active, and I'll have them come on my property once in a while. And when my kids were younger, they'd be in the backyard playing right on the edge of the wood line, and they'd be laughing and playing on the swing set and on the trampoline, laughing and giggling. And my kids always said they started hearing weird noises in the woods, and they didn't. They said like one time it said it sounded like a weird train making weird noises. One time they said it sounded like a UFO making like whoop noises, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably something's probably interested in you playing out there. And they'd always get like petrified, and they wouldn't, they'd come in the house and be scared, but
I was talking to one of my friends. He's a Navy SEAL, and we were talking about kind of the Dennis Martin case.
okay.
And he was telling me we were talking about that, and he said, "If you put me out on a trail," he said, "and I know that trail is going to be used," he said, "I could put my ghillie suit on. I can go out there, hide on that trail. You come through with a kid." He said, he said, he calls them masters of their environment. He said they're better in their environment, even than what we are. He said they have to live there. That's how they survive. But he said, even me, he said I could lay there, and when you come through with the kid, he said I could grab that kid, snap his neck, pull him underneath me, and lay there. And then whenever you go to search for the kid, get up and move away.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of his theories, is that they're smart enough that they kill the kid immediately, and they stash them under them, beside them, wherever they're at. They have a an attack area and an ambush point. And he said, whenever a mom or a dad, you miss your kid, you panic, you start looking for them, you start going out into the woods hollering for them. And he said while they're doing that, that's when they make their escape.
Yeah, and that's funny too. When you mentioned with the Dennis Martin case, I think um, something happened along that investigation where I think another family saw something on the other side of that park, and it said it was they described it as a big hairy like a bear walking, and they said it was almost like it was carrying something.
Yes. Yeah, and I think when there's somebody else on another trail or something too that ran into something kind of weird, him and his son or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, so there's definitely something was going on in there. And then I seen an interview on YouTube and they took it down. I saved the link to it, but it's gone. It's no longer available. But there was a guy on there and he was walking in a graveyard and he said that he was related to Dennis Martin and that they had found out that his family back a long time ago had some encounters with these things inside of there. And whenever he was took, when the Green Berets, I think it was Green Berets showed up, some
Mm-hmm.
special forces, that they showed up, and he said they weren't there necessarily to save Dennis. They were there to kill whatever got him, and to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that Dennis didn't survive it because of what he had seen. And I
Oh
thought
wow.
that's a wicked thought.
That is
And
a wicked thought. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about that. I watched a recent podcast last C. Wayne Tithero on Paranormal Odyssey, I think it is, and he had a guest on it was kind of saying that the Dennis Martin case was an actual abduction because there was a like a scraggly looking guy that was described that was also witnessed, and he was pretty much just he was unkept man, like almost like a mountain man slash hillbilly kind of person that lives in the woods, and they think that might have had some. But I mean, when you bring in the Green Berets, you don't bring in the Green Berets just to do a search and rescue. When you're bringing the Green Berets, that's pretty much seek and destroy.
yeah,
That's a
and they
kill me.
didn't they didn't coordinate with anybody either. They done their own thing. So that tells you something there too. They were on a mission. I'm glad you brought up that about the feral people. Pretty much, I was a skeptic, kind of that a little bit until last summer. And just so your viewers know, if you are out hunting these things, it is not just these things you need to worry about. I was with my sister when she was doing this last summer,
Yeah.
and I haven't even told anybody about this. We were headed down to do an investigation, and we're in a very, very remote area. And as we're heading down, we have these old bridges that go over these creeks, which are actually flood creeks. It's all floodplain.
Right.
And we're coming up to this creek. This person crawls over the side of the bridge, and all he has on is like these old tore up shorts. And he starts walking toward our car, and he falls on his knees, and he just falls over in the middle of the road. And of course, I have my sister and my daughter with me. I said, "Don't drive up to him." So I stepped out, opened my door, and I yelled, asked him if he was okay. And he starts using like a lot of vulgarity, like "drive your effing car up here. What are you effing doing?" And I'm telling him, now I got my daughter with me. If you need help, I'll get you help. And I didn't know if it was an ambush, how many's down there, or what. And I got my daughter, my sister, and he starts like coming toward the car. So we backed up, and he just like gets crazy and starts running toward the car. I actually had to draw down on him, and we called the sheriff, and the sheriff came out and got him. And come to find out, this guy's been living down there. I
So
mean,
he was a real mountain man.
yeah, he said he stunk so bad he couldn't hardly put him in the car.
Oh dang.
Yeah, when you hear things cracking in the woods and you're
Yeah.
out there, you don't know what's watching you.
You don't know. I mean, I don't know if you recently watched. They had American Horror Stories last season. They did like the short skit stories, where they had certain stories for certain things over. Like they had like the UFOs back in like the early '60s, but Eisenhower and the whole treaty agreement that he did with them. But they also had another one that was. I mean, you can tell it was based on a Dennis Martin case because it was a family. Their son goes missing in a national park, and then this episode was attributed to feral beings, and these feral beings were like backwoods inbred, like seven generation inbred, where they had like almost like superhuman speed and abilities from being inbred so much, and these things were killing. They were wiping out, and they even brought in a kill team, and these beings wiped out the kill team, and it was just reference to like the Dennis Martin case because I've even did research and found out that the writers and producers and all that, the creators of that show, were actually were dedicated kind of Dennis Martin case that's where they got that whole idea from, and they ran with it. It was actually pretty good, but yeah, feral humans are no joke. I mean, I know Jesse from Hellbent Holler, they've encountered things like that where they were in the woods out in Kentucky, Hellbent Holler, and they've seen things and they've heard it's like where the feral humans out there, and it's like when you're doing your research, you got to carry a sidearm and at least something that'll something like that, so one of those kind of people come at you, you got to be able to protect yourself because they might look at you as food because that's if you're not a
Right.
deer and they ain't eaten a while that they need to eat something, they're cannibalistic. So why not?
Yes, and I was talking to Jessica Jones earlier. The cryptid huntress, and we were talking. She, when it comes to spirits, I'm done with that. I told her, I've had encounters with them, and I don't mess with that. That gets crazy. I've had some really bad experiences, but there was a young boy when my mom was younger, and he lived. He was an MR patient, and he would play outside in his backyard, and he got to where he was going to the wood line, and his mom said he would stay out longer and longer and longer.
Mm-hmm.
So she asked him one day, she said, "What are you doing out there?" And he said he had met a hairy man, a friend.
Mm.
Well, he kept doing this for, I guess, a long time. Well, he got to where he was staying overnight. And eventually the mom started leaving his food on the back porch, and he would come and get the food would be gone, and then he was gone, and eventually he never returned.
So he went feral.
That was what their thoughts were. The game wardens, the sheriff's department. This would have been back in the 50s, 60s. They done a huge search, and they never found him. And
Wow.
she said he was always, seemed well took care of. He was, he was putting on weight, so he was eating. And she said he was very happy. He could not wait to go be with whatever this thing was.
Wow, that's amazing. Have you ever? Steve wants to know. Have you ever checked, like, investigated the LBL, Land Between the
Um,
Lakes?
I've read a little bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been there.
Okay.
I've read about the I think the people were slaughtered in the camper, and then there was one that supposedly survived it. Um, I think it would be an interesting place to go investigate. Uh, I wouldn't mind going down there. I think it would be interesting. I don't know why that wouldn't happen.
Yeah. No, that's a very tangible experience that I've heard of. I wouldn't even call it a story. I truly believe it. I mean, several friends of mine that live out in that Martin Groves, Barton Nunnally, Daryl Denton, all those guys. They actually researched that area because they live so close to the Land Between the Lakes. They go there like once every other week or every other 2 weeks. They go there and research the area, and they get all kinds of activities. But I mean, it's just crazy. Certain areas are just have higher activities. Like, it's just a higher, you know, so much going on out there. It's almost like it's a hot spot.
And that's what's weird around here is I know places I can take my family fishing, and it's probably going to be a good night. And then you just know those one places that you don't go because if you do and you stay there till dark, that bad things are going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's the area, maybe the there's enough prey in that area, more food, cover. I'm not sure what causes them to stay in there. Some people even mentioned to me that it could be the rock that's around. That the rock can hold
Yeah.
energy. They might be
My
attracted.
my friend my friend Paul Chafin from Kentucky Dogman Project. He lives in Kentucky. He says a lot of the areas where he sees has like dogman encounters and whatnot. Like, it's a high limestone and in the mountains, high content of limestone and quartz, and the areas where it's like a hot spot, higher sighting, range. So it makes sense. That stuff is it's energy, and that all that rock quartz crystal, it all like stores energy. And if these things are feeding off of the energy somehow, I mean, they're drawn to that area where it's high in that, and all that.
That makes sense because I'm right smack dab in the middle of coal mines. I mean,
Hmm.
I've got coal mines all around me. And
Nice.
oh yeah, yeah. There's huge hills and caves and crevices they've made, and I mean, it gets pretty eerie down in there.
What else would we talk about? I guess did we talk about the McNellis case in Oklahoma yet? Did we get to that?
We did a little bit. Uh, that is a weird that
Yeah,
that
let's
case.
touch on that.
That case. That was one of my first ones I really started working on. The little boy, and again, I was reading the report, and when I read the report, I noticed that whenever they gave the location of the body being found, that they didn't use roads, they used GPS coordinates, and it's unusual to use GPS coordinates whenever you're doing a location for a body, unless it's a game warden. Now, game wardens will use GPS coordinates because they're in the field a lot, which aren't by intersecting roads. But I
Mm-hmm.
knew where this happened. It was in town, and I knew it was weird. So I went ahead and I plugged in the coordinates, and it took me to a pond. And I was like, something's off. So I took a gamble, and I called the dad. I just straight up called the father, and I said, "Was your son found in the backyard or out by the pond?" Well, the story that he gave was they were cooking dinner. The
Mm-hmm.
little boy had ran around to the kitchen window, and the mom had told him, don't go far, supper's almost done. So the little boy supposedly goes to the backyard. Well, 15 minutes later, he goes to find the little boy. The little boy's missing. He doesn't end up finding the little boy, so he calls 911. Uh, the game warden shows up with the sheriff's department, police department. They search, and the little boy, he said, is found at the pond. If there's any young kids in the room, they might want to have them leave for this. But the little boy, he was found decapitated with his head placed underneath his left arm.
Mm.
Uh, his stomach was missing. Some of his organs had been ate on. His whole throat area was missing, and his arm was almost removed. And what they done is they would not allow. And I spoke to first responders that were there that called me, medics, police officers, neighbors. They wouldn't allow anybody into the backyard, and until they moved the body to the backyard. And when the body was moved to the backyard, that was named the location that the body was found. Okay. Well, later on, as the investigation pursued, I thought something's off, something's strange, something's not adding up. The way that the officers had wrote the reports. So I got to looking even deeper, and I called the father, and the father's like, "Well, they told me it would be better if the kid was found in the backyard, that not out by the pond, because it would cause people to start freaking out because people's already been calling in saying they're hearing this weird monster, and it was just a way to keep everything calm." Well, you don't lie to keep things calm, but
No.
anyways, that's what they done. And as I got to reading even further, and I really started digging on this family, they they were not what you would call a wealthy family, and I'm not knocking for them. It's just it's a perception that I've learned to use in my work. You look at everything, and they were not a rich family. They lived in an older home. It had it was dilapidated. It had overgrowth. Wasn't well took care of, the yard or anything, and you could tell they struggled. And after things kept coming to pass, I dug even deeper on the family, and
Okay.
come to find out the mother and father were they were into witchcraft.
Oh no.
Yeah, and then later, after I kept digging, the day that the little boy was killed
Hmm.
was on the day of the wolf moon, and
Was it
across
like one of those like satanic ritualistic days, like their backwards holidays, like Christmas? I know was like a high day for sacrifice, Christmas, Easter, and all that. And then you got like the reverse days. If you go in reverse, like everything with satanic ritualism, everything is in reverse of like the Bible. So they do all that in reverse backwards and like of
yeah,
certain holidays, which is crazy.
yeah, this moon supposedly was supposed to give more power to Wiccans if they sacrificed during this moon.
Oh
Whenever
no.
whenever this child was killed, he wasn't killed late night. He was killed almost at the precise time the moon became full. And I started finding that really strange. So I called the father back, and I started talking to him, and he's like, "We can no longer talk anymore. There's federal officers here, and they've took control of the situation, and I can't talk to you no more." So after
Mhm.
that happened, they moved from this old house to where they're now residing, which is a nice two-story house. They own the property. They have brand new cars. They
Ooh.
posted a thing on social media, said we're living our dream life. They're raising animals, selling them. A whole life change occurred, and they were
Wow.
moved out of the county. It's a very nice place. I mean,
These
their
were
whole life changed
these were poor folk, right? They were poor.
very.
They were
The
very poor, and now
Yeah,
they're living high on the hog. So it's almost I wouldn't even say almost. Somebody paid them off to be hush hush. To here's some hush hush money. Don't talk about it no more, and we'll make your wildest dreams come true. So
And
that's
the
crazy.
weird and the weird another weird thing of the case is they blamed it on a dog that the family supposedly had picked up as a stray.
Mm,
And they said this dog done all this. Well, uh, the dog was took on a Thursday night to the pound, I believe it was, and then on
mm,
Friday it was ordered by the game wardens to be destroyed by fire and not to do any necropsies or keep any swabs or anything, to go ahead and kill the dog if they knew the dog had done it. One of the ladies that worked at the pound, I talked to her, and she said we was begging them to do a necropsy because when we got the dog, she said there was no blood on the dog.
mm-hmm.
For the amount of damage that was done to that kid, and they said that dog done it, he should have been soaked in blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
She
that
said there
dog
was,
should be covered, and the only reason why they incinerated that dog was to remove any evidence that they couldn't get DNA off the dog, kind of taking the dog off the suspect list, so the dog couldn't get singled out. So they blame it on the dog. What other way to do it than to burn the dog so they can't get no DNA to put the blame against the dog and make it not guilty. It's crazy.
and the state also paid for the funeral for the little boy, and they had him cremated also.
Dang, that's
Every,
sad.
everything was burned.
I bet. I bet. Well, um, we were talking about the Tennessee murders too. With the dogs were blamed for the attacks out in Tennessee, Cobb County. I think one of them, the dog was like licking the body, and it was pretty much like dogs when they try to protect something, they'll stand over it and lick it, and that
Right.
dog was blamed, and they pretty much eradicated that dog too.
Yeah. You know, I've been been to calls and stuff and dealt with dogs. And if you
Yeah.
have a vicious dog, the dog is not vicious one moment and then vicious
Mhm.
the next. He's going to
Yeah.
be vicious the whole time you're there. And they say, well, these dogs killed this lady, but when we showed up, they were licking her, and we got out and we got her first aid and all this. And I guess those vicious dogs, they just stood there and watched. It
And
don't
they even were even able to capture the dogs. If a dog's that vicious, you're not going to capture a vicious dog. And with Cryptid Hunters saying Amber and Tony, yeah, that was Jimtown Road, Cobb County, Tennessee. I think we were talking about it earlier. Amber was, I mean, her body was devoured, and she
Yeah.
was also found in water. She was found in water, a creek or something, and she survived that, but she did not survive in the hospital. You
And they
know.
say also the dogs were so violent, and then you go back and you read the police report, and they say it took us over an hour and a half to catch the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
If the dogs are violent, they're not going to run from you. It's going to be easy to catch them. I mean, I've been to houses where dogs are jumping up on your patrol car trying to get in your window at you. If they're violent, you don't have to chase them.
Yeah.
And it tells me if you're chasing them, they're not violent, they're afraid, and they're trying to get away.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, why would you blame a dog? I mean, obviously, it's the best scapegoat for a cover up is you blame the dogs, or if there's dogs nearby, it's the best way to make something disappear and keep people from questioning it. Um, you know, and here's actually one that happened in Charlotte. I don't know if I really got deep into it, but I'll just talk about it now for a couple of minutes, and you give me your opinion. So last year, well, here's the first thing. Me and my wife went to this park in Charlotte. It's called McAlpine Creek. We did some expedition, trekking out there. She saw something from about 60 yards that was really big, black, and wide, tall, and it was 1 minute she saw it, next minute it was gone, like it just disappeared in the thin air, and she swore it was a squatch, and she has, I think she has an intuitive ability to see these things, and I don't. But she was looking right at it, waving to it. She's like, "You don't see it?" I'm like, "No, I don't see it." So this was like last February, March. I got pictures last year. I posted on Facebook from being out there. There's like a little creek and a lake. Well, all that being said, um, so that was like February, March. 6 months later, August 12th, a man named Matt Sullivan was reported missing from the same park at 1:45 p.m. They say he was last seen at this park. It's on Monroe Road in Charlotte. And 3 days later, uh, I'm trying not to get to the article because I'm trying to read the part. So his name is, here we go, Matt Sullivan. Um, he was 6'3", 230 pounds. It says he was familiar with this park. He went there just about every week to do like a little hike and go off the trails and do a little, just walk around and enjoy himself. He loved the outdoors. So somebody that's familiar with an area, I highly doubt that they're going to go missing anytime because they're familiar with the area. There was foul play was ruled out. He was also found, near a creek. It doesn't say in a creek, but near a creek, and that's not really that much water in the creek. I've been there before. There's a lake that's probably maybe 4 to 5 foot deep, but he wasn't found near the lake. He was found near the creek on the other side. So fast forward a couple months later, a 73-year-old man goes missing. They found him at the same park and actually found his body in the creek, in the water. A couple days after he went missing, and this was a 73-year-old man. And like I mentioned before, this water is like about a foot deep. I know this area at the top of my, I know this area really good. It's not far from my house. Um, but like I said, in a foot of water, how are you going to drown in a foot of water? And there's not a lot of information after like a couple initial reports from the news, and then they just blank it out and they don't talk about it no more. They just kind of dismiss it.
Right. Unfortunately, too, is you don't. I mean, if I was guessing, I would speculate both bodies were probably in the water. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like an ambush spot, don't it?
It does sound like an ambush spot by the water. I mean, um, when they showed like the video, I remember because I just took a clip from it before and I watched it. To remember, the video is actually like it's a little area. It's like a paved road, and on one side is woods, and the other side is where the creek is. And it's a perfect ambush spot, like you said, for something to happen to. And this is like it's not uptown because people think of Charlotte North, they think of like uptown with the high risers. This is actually the suburban side where there's actually parks and cities and past the city, but parks and like suburban areas and some woods. And I actually have woods by my house. And if you actually on my property, if I go back behind the woods of my property, it'll go to the road that overpasses where the Greenway Trail starts. And if I get on that Greenway Trail, it'll take me along that creek, and the creek goes all the way to that park. So yeah, I have access to all that.
You know, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he was telling me. He said, we were talking about the bodies being found. A lot of bodies that are found. They're not ate, they're not destroyed or anything. They're just dead.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about it, and he was saying, well, we know that the coroners and everybody, they're not 100% truthful. Uh, Say they had a broken neck, and then I asked him. I said, okay, what would be the point in that if they're not consuming the body? And he said, well, whenever a rancher has problems with coyotes and they don't want you in the area, they kill the coyote and they hang it on the fence. It tells the other coyotes that it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
He said maybe they're killing us, leaving us there, telling us it's not safe for you to be here. It's a territorial deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Territorial being like that, or like even at a threat to the food source. If you're considered a threat to the food source, you're going to be, you're going to get wiped out too. If they're like if they think you're taking their food from them or something, or you're going to get it and they're not going to get it, they're going to make sure that it doesn't ever happen again, and you're going to be made an example of. I mean, in
My
my opinion, that makes sense.
my brother-in-law, I got a kick out of it. It was so funny. He didn't believe in none of this. He thought we was crazy and everything. He wanted to go fishing with us one night and was like, "Yeah, you can go." So we go down, and he had his spot a little ways from us out on a point that went out into the lake. He's probably 100 yards from us. We could see him. Well, my mom went up to bait her pole, which was at my truck behind where we was at. And whenever she was baiting her hook or whatever, she yelled at me. She says, "Mike, come here." So I walked up to the truck, which was away from the lanterns. You could still see the truck, and a little bit of the lantern shine past the truck into the woods, but it was dimmer, and my eyes were still adjusting. And she's like, "Look in the fork of that tree on the other side of the truck." So I started looking in the fork of the tree, and to me at first it looked like a big bullfrog. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Man, that's a big frog." And she goes, "No, no, 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 keep looking." And I'm looking, and this thing's got yellow eyes, and it's blinking.
Oh wow.
It's a head. And a lot of people ask me, they said, "Why didn't you shoot it?" Well, I work with the SOT team also, and sometimes when you shoot something, you can set off a chain reaction. You don't know how many's there. We got kids with us and everybody. I
Yeah.
don't want to start something that's going to get the kids hurt or somebody hurt. So we just kept an eye on it and everything. Well, my brother-in-law, he comes walking up there. Well, he sees it and he's like, "What is that? What is it?" He starts freaking out because he don't believe in this stuff anyways. Well,
Mhm.
eventually it did move away. Well, we decided, okay, we're going to leave. We're not going to stay. So we start loading the kids in the truck. We're loading, the chairs and the fishing pole holders, the poles, everything. Well, his lantern's out on this peak.
Mhm.
You can watch this thing walk out to his lantern. It turns his lantern all the way down
Oh
and then
no!
walks back off into the woods. So me and
Dang.
him, I grabbed my rifle and we went up and we retrieved his stuff. And what had happened, it was funny, but whatever had went up there, it took his bologna sandwich.
Oh no!
Yeah,
It
he won't
stole
go.
his food.
He won't go back. He has not been back
Yeah.
in the dark since. He won't go back. He said, I'm not going back.
Okay, here's one that this one's a couple of years old. I don't know if you remember, but this was actually pretty popular along the news. A little boy, I'm pretty sure this was an autistic boy, and he went missing. And I think this was in the wintertime, and it was like really cold out, and he should have died of hypothermia. And they found him, and he said he was a bear man, or bear kept him warm for 3 days, and I think they found him near a creek or something 3 days later.
Yeah, he
He
was
just went
found.
missing.
He was found on like a little island in a creek, and
Yep.
same area they'd searched over and over and over. And he even told him that the bear brought him berries back, I think, in its hand.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have to almost have an opposable thumb to be able to pick berries and to be able to, offer them to a kid. And a bear is not going to take care of a kid. A bear, I think, would eat the kid. They were supposed to be hibernating during that time, anyways. If
Well,
they,
that's true. They're supposed to be hibernating. If you think about a bear have claws that'll tear a kid up to shreds without what maybe accidentally, but still it'll do it. Any kind of contact that those claws will tear. So this has to be something with gentle, soft fingertips without claws that's gonna coddle that boy and keep him warm. I'm thinking maybe it was a mama squatch that kind of took that motherly instinct to save one like she's like one of her own almost.
yeah, that's what I think too. I agree. I think it was a mother that came through, and then again, it scares you again because then you get back to the kids. They're always interested in the kids.
Hmm. Well, another thing too with like David Pilates investigates a lot of kids have some kind of autistic, um,
Yeah,
you know, disability where like the kid ones that go missing. Like I think I don't know if Dennis Martin. I think I heard that Dennis Martin had some kind of autistic thing going on with him, but they didn't talk about it much. And this the Dennis Martin case, I mean, this was back in what the 60s, and
yeah,
this was Katie's Cove, tennis. Katie's Cove was it North Carolina?
yeah. I
On
think
Katie's
so.
Cove, it's like right on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee, right on
Yeah, I think yeah, I was right in that
like
area.
Mount National Park. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, there's always things that kind of go hand in hand when it comes to this, and it just makes you, it flips your head, and you just don't goes, it just never stops spinning. It keeps you asking questions and getting answers.
And another scary thing is I live on a farm. I have all my life, and whenever you have a pig or a cow or a dog or goats, whatever, if they have a baby that has something wrong with it, they
Hmm.
can tell from birth. Some of them will just stop feeding it. The pigs, they'll eat it. So it makes you wonder: are they sensing this in our kids, and they're finding them as they need to be
You
eradicated?
know what? That's a really good point. I didn't even think of that. Like, yeah, if they're like labeled like almost like lame, like almost like with dog pups or like the runt, they'll just push them off to the side. The mom won't feed it. It won't get no food or nothing. Or like even birds, if a mama bird thinks her little baby bird's not gonna do well, she'll just drop it out of the nest and let it die.
Right.
So they consider these children and lame them anyway if they can pick up on that, which it was. I mean, it's incredible to even think like that, and it's like a whole light bulb goes off in your head. It's like, wow, maybe there's something going on there that they can pick up on that, and they know there's something wrong with the kids mentally challenged or whatever, so they deem them lame, and they're pretty much sacrifice material, I guess, or they kill them off or whatever.
That's what I thought. Animals do it all the time.
Hmm.
So and if they can sense it, because sometimes we can't tell, when they're born if something's wrong with them or not. But the pig, she'll just eat one and then save the rest. If they have that instinct, they know. and it's scary because my son, my oldest son, he has a little bit of autism, and he had a really bad experience fishing one night. We were fishing, and I've never I've never seen an orb, but he told me that night. He said, "Dad, there was an orb went through the woods," and I said, "Went through the woods." And he said, "Yeah, Dad, right over here beside me." And I was with my mom and everybody that night. I actually have some of this on film, a video I did. And I said, "I didn't see it." I said, "What it looked like?" And he said, "Well, it was about the size of a basketball, and it
Mm-hmm.
was orange." So I was like, "Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out for it, you know." And so we're sitting there fishing, and the next thing I know, I'm sitting there by my mom, and I hear like this woof past my head, and this
Mm-hmm.
big rock slams into the ground and just smashes my mom's ankle. And I turn around and look, and of course it's dark out there, and we don't see it, but we can hear something walking, and it starts whistling at us. So I drew my weapon and I told mom, I was like, "Y'all head up to the truck." Well,
Mm-hmm.
behind us, when this happened, another one started whistling, and then there was another one on the other side of us. So they had circled us, whatever this was. So we're loading stuff into the truck, and on camera, actually, you can hear it on camera. A rock comes by, just misses me and my son, and smashes into the side of my truck. I mean, it dents my truck. And we got loaded up and got out of there. I haven't been back there, but that was one of the most violent encounters I've had. I mean, that was close to somebody really getting hurt. And then down on the lake, I interviewed a guy. Just happened to run across him. Him and his wife were, I mean, they were throwing their stuff in the truck. And I was going fishing. I asked them, I said, "Are y'all staying another night? Or are y'all going to be down here, you know?" And they're like, "No, we're getting the hell out of here." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Come here and look." And his truck is bashed in. And I'm like, "Okay, can I film this?" And he's like, "Yeah, you know, if you get it done before we go, you can film whatever you want to. We get loaded, we're gone." His truck was
Yeah.
bashed in. There was a large handprint on his back window. I got a picture of that. And there was a large footprint went across where their tent was at that night. And they were scared to death.
Well, so
And
you
this
got
was,
all that evidence then, right?
yeah, I done a video on it. Yeah, his
Wow.
truck and everything. And they were scared to death. He was freaked out. You know, he said, "Man, it smashed my truck, and it was a nice truck."
Mm.
And the
Man,
footprints were there, the handprint, and it was in almost the same area that we was at.
I'd be
I tried.
I'd be upset too, man. If they
Oh,
messed up my trail boss, I'd be real upset.
oh, it did. It put a huge dent in his truck. I mean,
Damn,
just a nasty dent.
that's crazy. Thanks everybody. Yeah, I mean, we're almost at it. We'll be at an hour in like less than 10 minutes. I mean, an hour goes fast so quick. Did we talk about the Hamilton case? I know you wanted to maybe get into that a little bit if you had a couple minutes to spare before we finish
Yeah,
off.
I followed her pretty close. They found her in water. She was in a ditch of water up to her shoulders. She was still alive when they found her. Again, they said that she was consumed while she was alive, and they said that she was uncooperative. I don't know how she could have been cooperative in the shape she was in. I would guess that she would have been in shock. But
Now, is this Brenda Hamilton? Is this the teacher, Brenda Hamilton?
yeah, they found a Nutra laying on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They argued over that. Some of them said it was indigenous to the area. Some said it wasn't. That was a big fight. They actually, had a board. They created a board because people were so aggravated over not getting any answers. They had a board, and the board didn't end up giving them any more than anybody else. But there was a lady, and I thought this was pretty important. I had dug and dug. She had called 911 three
That's
days
right.
prior to Miss Hamilton getting, fatally attacked. And she reported a large black, she called it a monster, walking bipedally in the field, which was right by where Miss Hamilton's body was found. And the dispatcher, and I don't know why the dispatcher done it because they're not supposed to. They're supposed to report as they hear it. But she
Mm-hmm.
decided to change the report, and she may not have. It might have been changed higher up, but they said it came out as a misidentified animal, which was a panther.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fish and Game are saying, "Well, there's no panther around here. There never has been." So then they start saying, "Well, it could have been a mountain lion, you know, could have been a
Mm.
dog, it could have been a cat, a rabbit, whatever." But
It was a wampus cat, you know.
yeah, and it's frustrating when you get people calling in saying, "I'm seeing this creature." 3 days later, she's attacked and killed and consumed. And then they say she's uncooperative. And I wonder, is uncooperative mean that they showed her a picture of a coyote and said, "This is what attacked you"? And she said, "No, that's not what it was. It was a monster." And they say, "No, no, no, it was this," right? Is that what uncooperative is? And if you're uncooperative, I'm not saying it happens, but if you're uncooperative, does that affect your outcome, your treatment?
You saw a bear or else, you saw a wolf or else,
I've
you know.
wondered that.
That I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, I've heard so many stories where people were harassed to say it was this, say it was that, say it was anything other than what they really saw, or they would not be like, people, even government employees. I mean, their pension, their retirement, they're forced to get put away in jail. Some of these people wind up with I've heard people wind up with like child porn charges if they don't want to play ball with the government. I mean, it's crazy. It's really, really freaking crazy where people can't get the truth. They can't get the truth of what happened to them because the veil, the shade, the cover up, all that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Look at the Girl Scout murders in Oklahoma. You had when that happened, they said they had a shapeshifter there. 23 seasoned OSBI, local, federal, state police. Right? You had 23 of them
Mm.
retired over that. 3 of them killed themselves. Others went to mental facilities. Some
Mm.
disappeared, and that's
That's
23. And these are seasoned professionals. Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, and they retired over what they seen. I
yeah, that
mean,
must have been some dark stuff for what they had to endure and see and deal with. If how many you said 3 of them killed themselves,
yeah, they
3 of them
said
suicided.
3 killed themselves. Some just went missing.
Suicide can mean multiple things because I mean Phil
Yeah,
Schneider was suicided too. I mean,
right.
people that went against the Clintons were suicided. Their brake lines were cut and they were suicided. So you got to that word is very thin when you hear suicide nowadays for people who are like whistleblowers.
Well, there was a guy in one case I looked at close to my county, shot himself 3 times in the head with a single shot and jumped down a well and pulled stuff on top of him, and
Yeah,
it was
that's
a suicide.
impossible.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah,
It's almost like the whole conspiracy, the whole what is that the Jack Ruby syndrome.
yeah. And the pigs just keep getting fatter, and the
Well,
truth just
that's
keeps
that's
getting.
another thing I want to talk about too. Have you heard anything weird thing about animal? I know there was recent animal attacks in Colorado. I mean, have you heard anything about that recently with animal attacks? I mean, these things are the blood's getting drained out of them, the eyes are cauterized, like all the organs are taken out. I mean, I've watched a special last night on the Travel Channel. They're trying to say these are real life vampires doing it. And I'm like, no way.
Puerto Rico. I just looked at a case in Puerto Rico and in Chile. Uh,
Mhm.
they have the same thing happening. And what's weird is this creature is making one bite. It's hitting the jugular, every
Mhm.
bite underneath the right side of the neck. And they said whatever is doing this is like large straws, and these animals are totally drained. Uh, it's moved up to cattle now. It's draining the cattle dry. And there was a kid
Mhm.
killed in his bed. They left the window open, and he had the same punctures in the side of his neck.
Mhm.
And his mom said he was as white as the sheets he was sleeping on, and there wasn't one drop of blood on the sheets.
Yeah, I mean, people. I mean, there's a lot of conjecture with the alien abductions, and they're the whole. I don't want to say the word, but the whole harvesting of something that sounds like reminds you of, or it's very familiar sounding with demel drome. But I won't say the actual word because I know. I mean, I know Jess is on here and her show has got. She's had. I've had problems with my show where my audio went out of nowhere. Myself got knocked out. You just talk about certain things about truth bombs and what's really going on with the world, but it's sadly it's a dark place and there's so much cover ups, conspiracies, and it makes you really wonder what's really going on out there. And when you try to get truth out, you like no matter what they try to silence you. There you go.
Yeah,
Uh, just penalized.
yeah. She says it all the time. We
Yeah.
was talking about that, me and her. You know what's
Uh-huh.
weird? They had a guy come out that flies the F-35,
Hmm.
and he said they're now equipping the F-35s with hologram projectors. And they had another guy come out, and he was talking about the aerosols that you're seeing in the skies and stuff.
Hmm.
He said, picture that as a green screen.
Yep, I've heard that too. Or something to make to be able to project something while they're putting all that barium and everything else in the chemtrails. They're putting that out in the sky, so it's almost like fuel for, like, if you think of like a neon light, it helps it project the image of what you want to put out there. You know,
And you put the image of an alien attack.
alien
You,
attack
you,
or the reincarnation of the second coming of the Messiah. I mean, people will, and you do the Messiah, you do, the Muslim God, and then you do like Buddha. You do all three simultaneously, and that's going to be serious.
there was a guy talked about that I listened to the other day. He said they were going to merge all of them together to form one God.
Yep,
You know,
one world
and
religion. I mean, that's on its way with the whole New World Order and you know, the whole. I mean, I did a show on that with Three Beards podcast with Craig and Brian. The whole Project Bluebeam, where it's a whole, like, just a plan to use that as a way to make one world government, and make everybody worship one worldly god.
then you use your stealth bombers and stuff. You fly above the holograms, and you can make it look like all kinds of stuff's happening.
You can make it look like you're blowing a spacecraft up that ain't there, right?
Sure could.
Wow. Man, we definitely need to do this again. We could just go on for like 3 more hours.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Sadly, I only do an hour podcast one night, but and Squatching Mountain Mama, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to hear whatever you have to talk about with your experience. You can reach out to me in the North Carolina Cryptid and Paranormal Project Facebook group, or you can reach out Thomas Cardos on Facebook. And if you wanted to be a guest, yeah, I'd be more than welcome to have you. But everybody in the chat, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Listen to me and Mike, just talk about some of these cases, and try to bring the truth out to you, because the truth is, I mean, that my famous I think it was my eighth grade quote from my eighth grade yearbook was, "The truth is out there," from the X-Files, Fox Mulder. Like, that was my quote from my yearbook. So when you're in eighth grade and that was your quote, I guess you have big calling to be, do what I'm doing today to get the truth out to the people. And Mike, thank you so much. If anybody's interested, Mike, you're actually doing a live stream tomorrow on Abnormal Investigations on your YouTube channel, right? What time is that at?
I think it's 7 o'clock. It's just going to be a questions and answers. People can just ask me questions, whatever. I try to do it every now and then for people that's got questions.
Awesome. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. If I can make it, I'll jump in and I'll do some support and maybe ask a question or two. Love to hear from you again. But once we're done with this broadcast, you could just jump out of the studio, and I will get with you tomorrow sometime, because I'm going to wrap it up and head out.
All right, man. It was an honor being here with you. Thanks.
It was an honor to have you on. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
You too.
All righty. Okay, everybody. Thank you again. And, I appreciate you all coming on tonight and being, a great chat. I mean, this was the highest chat I've had since last week. But I'm humble, really. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers. I'm trying to get there. I think I'm at 892. I'm gonna get this out there. This is my night vision camera right here, and this is my 4K. This actually has night vision built into it, IR. And I'm gonna start doing some live investigations in the woods. Once I get to 1,000, I can do that live from the get go. So I do appreciate everybody tonight. Thanks again, and y'all have a blessed evening, and God bless. Thank you.